Wonderful. Shall we do it now?
Hey fans, it's Shadow Weaver weekend. This weekend we're going to be taking a look at two of the newest Shadow Weaver figures from Super7. And today we're going to be taking a look at the vintage style Shadow Weaver. And then we're going to be looking at the classics version of Shadow Weaver, which is the Club Grayskull, which is a box in a box of the more posable, larger Shadow Weaver figure, which is going to find a very nice spot in my collection in the back corner there, right in front of the original Classics Shadow Weaver that was released. Both figures are currently available on Big Bad Toy Store, a good friend of the channel. Great packing, great customer service, and if you're in the US, a very low flat shipping rate. But first we're going to be taking a look at the vintage style Shadow Weaver, and this particular figure gets a hearty unfinished business stamp of approval. And I like to use the term unfinished business for toys that look like they should have come out back in the 80s. So from figure to packaging, toys that look like they would have been perfect as part of that last wave or the extra wave that we never got back in the 80s. And this is definitely one of those figures. Shadow Weaver was never released in the original line, either for Masters of the Universe or for Shira, Princess of Power. There were quite a few Shira figures which were released on a different looking card, and they did release some of the female Horde figures in that line, but they never released a Shadow Weaver. And the interesting thing about the Shira line is a lot of the Horde figures were released under the Masters of the Universe logo. So back in the day, they didn't actually release Horde in the Shira Princess of Power line. They released it on a Masters of the Universe card, similar to this one right here, another vintage style Super7 figure. So I love the idea of releasing the Shira figures all on this type of card. I don't see too many Masters of the Universe collectors who have a lot of the Shira figures because they're so different in style. But if they just keep releasing these Shira figures, these Princess of Power figures, and Horde on these types of cards, I think that can make for a really beautiful collection to display. And here's another piece of unfinished business. The Shira figure we never got but should have gotten. Shira in the Masters of the Universe style, not Princess of Power toy line style, on a vintage Masters of the Universe card. And these just look so fantastic. So much nostalgia, so many great memories of seeing these old cards on the shelves, hanging from the pegs in the old toy stores. And before we open up the card, let's take a look at the artwork on the back. Just like in the vintage style, you've got sort of an animation comic looking style of artwork on the back here, with dark Horde magic at her disposal. Shadow Weaver unleashes her power against Shira. And there's Shadow Weaver dueling Shira with Horde on his throne. Very reminiscent of the old 80s packaging. And the artwork right here is just like the old artwork. Same style. This is what the Classics figures were based on. And Shadow Weaver right in the bottom corner there. And she does have the waist twist that a lot of the classics, the vintage retro figures did. Can't say the classics because that's now a line to itself. As seen on TV, love that. And in behind looks like it has a comic, but it's not a comic, it's a piece of artwork. But I still love that there's some sort of artistry in behind there, like the old figures used to have the comic book in there. So let's open up Shadow Weaver and take a look at the figure. All right, Shadow Weaver is free, and let me just take a second to give a tip of the cap to Super7 on their packaging here. I've cut this open so that I can easily put her back in the packaging, maybe just put a piece of tape up here and display it on the card again. But she does come secured in this extra piece of plastic so she's not rattling around and scuffing up the inside of the packaging or wearing off any paint, which is extremely nice. And then the accessories are in their own separate bag. So I like when companies go the extra mile and do stuff like that. If the accessories were just rattling around loose in there, then that's how you get paint scuffs and paint wear. I'm not able to get the card out unless I were to just, you know, rip this right off. But because I want to keep the card nice, and I've done a nice cut there, give you as good a look as I can here at the artwork in here, and it's classic Filmation artwork from the show. Looks like a still right from the old Lou Scheimer show right in there. And that looks really nice. So we'll pop that back in there. And the figure, right off the bat, first impression is, hello gorgeous. This is a beautiful, beautiful figure. It is so shiny. Once again, pictures don't really do these classic, I have to stop calling them classic figures and start calling them vintage or retro style. Pictures don't do them justice. This is toy artistry right here. I'm very impressed. It's very beautiful. Different type of body construction than any of the other figures. It doesn't have... Now, I don't know if the arms can pop off of this thing. I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to risk it. I know the arms pop off easily from the regular male figures, but that's not something I want to try and then go, oh, well, I guess I know. Knowing is not half the battle in that case. But the arms do go up quite a bit, and they do stop when they hit the hood, the mask piece. So that is the only thing that impedes the arms, but still has quite a bit of range. You don't need much. All you need is basically a little bit forward or at the sides for a magician or sorcerer type of figure. The head is restricted, but it's enough. Looking left and right, I think it's enough. Just enough to change the gaze from there to there. Very sinister looking. I think that's just enough, and it's better than having it be a separate piece that doesn't move at all, as we've seen on some other figures that have hoods that feel like it should at least budge, but it doesn't budge at all. And this is really, really nice here on the back. She's got this cape, and it's not just a quick, easy, lazy piece of cloth stuck in there. There's a pattern, a jagged pattern cut into the back of it. That looks really lovely. It's a very nice texture too. It's not quite satin, but it does have a little bit of a sheen to it. Same on both sides. But it's very light. Very nice material. I like it. And on the back of the head here, we've got this extra piece of hood hanging down. It's got a little bit of give to it, so it doesn't feel like it's going to snap. That's good. These things do fall off shelves, and it's always sad whenever something falls and then snaps and has to be glued together, but that looks like it can take a good shot. And the base is solid with a little hole in it, which I assume is for one of the accessories in here. That would be enough for me. I'd already be very impressed with this figure based on what I've seen so far. But she does have the classic, wow, that is awesome. That is a super strong waist twist, and it goes really far back. This gal does yoga. Look at that. Holy smokes. Works both ways? Yes, it does. That's awesome. Really cool. A feature that probably a lot of grown-ups don't use anymore these days, but it's fun. It's a good memory, and it's cool to know it's in there if you want to just play around with it someday, knock some figures around, give them a slappity slap. And let's take a look at the accessories, which are taped in this little baggie right here. And dump them all out, and she does come with a stand. So to give the illusion of floating in mid-air, and sometimes the problem with these things, the road to heck is paved with good intentions. I've had some of these style of stands break because there's a little bit of a snap going on in there. So that's probably just this seam right here. It is a little on the tight side, but it does fit. So after you get it in that first time, I think, yeah, it's a little less scary that you're gonna... My main problem whenever I'm using stands like this is this part will break right off. Snap. But this seems pretty sturdy, and take it or leave it. They're trying to go for the floating effect for Shadow Weaver. Make her look like she's this floating sorceress, evil sorceress look to her, but I think this looks more to me like she's got a wine glass up her wardrobe. So I don't know if I like this as much as the floating stands they've done for Orko and some of the other Classics figures. It's a nice idea, but I almost feel like maybe that would have looked better. Just something smaller, taking up less space on the bottom. I really like how that looks, just like that. So I don't feel the need to have her elevated, especially that would make her look much taller than some of the other figures. Like, let's bring in the retro vintage style Shira. So scale is a big thing for collectors, and even though they're still on the same scale, Shadow Weaver appears taller with this floaty stand, and I think personally that just looks nicer. Shadow Weaver should be a little smaller than the powerful looking Princess of Power. And in case you're wondering, no, the hands and eyes don't glow in the dark. I just checked, and no glow coming off of them. Sometimes Masters of the Universe toys surprise me. I was surprised to learn just recently that Evil Lynn's wand, or staff, whatever it's called, does glow in the dark. I wasn't expecting that because it's blue, but it does. Nothing on Shadow Weaver glows though. She does include 2 accessories though. Every sorceress, I don't want to call her a sorceress because Masters of the Universe already has their heroic sorceress, and this gal is, she's just dag nasty evil. But she has 2 of these, one with a little ball on it to cast spells. So all you have to do is give a tug of the hood and it'll cast a spell. And then the other wand, it looks like a little torch on here. A little flame on the end there, which is not removable. But since only one of her hands is actually sculpted to hold, this one is more just sticking out to cast spells. She can't actually hold anything. So you have to choose one or the other. And the figure is pretty intuitive, so it knows if it's holding this wand or this wand. If she's holding the flaming wand, when you pull the hood, you get a fire spell. So that's pretty cool. I like how this one looks better though. It's a little longer, and it just seems a little more in keeping with Evil Lyn and just evil sorceresses in general. Articulation, just to finish up, because I touched on it earlier, the hands. She's got a wrist articulation. Awesome. That's really cool for a vintage fan, because the old figures never had that, and that makes a big difference. Just from being able to hold the wand like that to like that, or even upside down. So that's really cool. And then for the other hand especially, since it's kind of a useless hand, if you turn it, that looks more like she's casting a spell. Unfortunately, there doesn't look like there's any place to store the extra wand. You can't really store it in there, and I don't know, maybe you could sticky tack it to her back. Doesn't really matter. Just put it off in a drawer someplace. But that is a really nice looking figure. Perfect example of unfinished business. There's some people working over at Super7 who are doing the figures they wanted to see when they were young, and they're doing them. They're making them. They're putting out the ones that we had never seen before but always wanted to see, and it gives me hope for other figures from the Filmation series that we never saw. Prominent figures, not just characters who showed up every now and then, but I'm talking like a classic, retro, vintage style Queen Marlena, or a Filmation style King Randor. We did get a vintage Randor, but it was more of a battle armor Randor than the tights-wearing king who cooled his heels in a throne most of the time. It's a really wonderful-looking figure from Super7. Looks fantastic with your vintage Masters of the Universe figures, which I'll show off in a second, and looks great with the other modern vintage Super7 figures. And one of the biggest complaints with the Super7 figures is because they have done away with the elastic bands inside the hips, that the new joint sometimes breaks. You don't have to worry about that with Shadow Weaver. There's not going to be any legs snapping in here. It's light. It looks like it's a big solid figure, but this whole part is hollow. So it's light, it's not going to be falling over at all. Nice wide base to this dress. And that's an especially nice feature because some figures don't do so well in terms of standing on their own. And if they're falling off of a shelf, that's possibly causing some paint damage, chipping on the figure, or other toys too. I've had things fall in the toy museum here on top of other things, and it's scuffed canopies or put scratches in vintage items, and that just sucks. So it's nice to know this thing can't fall over thanks to dark magic and smart sculpting on the part of Super7. And here's the vintage style Shadow Weaver with the vintage Horde and the Fright Zone. And I think no vintage Horde collection is complete without this modern vintage retro Shadow Weaver figure. Goes perfectly with the other vintage Horde members. It's shiny, minty, fresh, but it's also very spooky and creepy looking. Thanks as always to the Patreon tribe for contributing and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to share it around the internet with your fellow Masters of the Universe and Princess of Power fans. Feel free to leave a comment below or on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. And to join the tribe, cast a spell on subscribe. Horde must stay.